Good day everyone, I am Selvin Miles Pirilieta and together with my groupmates, we will going to discuss another topic for midterm which is sex-related inheritance, specifically focusing on sex-limited and sex-influenced traits. These traits contribute to differences in physical characteristics and genetic expression between males and females. In classical Mendelian genetics, traits are passed down from parents to offspring based on dominant and recessive alleles. However, not all traits follow these simple patterns. Some are influenced by biological sex, meaning that their expression depends not only on genetic makeup but also on factors like sex hormones. This is where sex-limited and sex-influenced traits come into play. Now, these types of inheritance do not strictly follow Mendelian rules because their expression depends on external factors such as hormone levels. Therefore, we classify them as non-Mendelian traits. And understanding these patterns is crucial in genetics as they help explain the biological differences observed between sexes beyond just the presence of X and Y chromosomes. Okay, before we proceed to our discussion, let's have these few illustrations to observe. First is the lactation in mammals. Lactation or milk production only happens in women or females, right? But why don't males produce milk even though they have the genes for it? The answer lies on the hormonal regulation in females. Even though males and females inherit the same genetic material from their parents, the way these genes are expressed can be vastly different due to hormonal influence. Both men and women have genes for breast tissue, but only women develop functional mammary glands due to the presence of estrogen and progesterone. Thus, due to these hormones, it enables the female's breast to become functional in producing and secreting milk. Now for the second illustration, this shows the pattern baldness or the baldness pattern of men and women. Now if a male and female both inherit the gene for baldness, why might only the male go bald? Now this answer lies on the testosterone levels or the effect of testosterone that is present on the males. Due to the high levels of testosterone in males, the effect is more prominent in them and it is more observed in males due to the presence of the high levels of testosterone, which enhances the effect of the pattern baldness. Now the question is, why do males and females show different traits even if they share the same genes? As I said earlier that even though males and females inherit the same genetic material from their parents, the way these genes are expressed can be vastly different due to hormonal influence. Certain traits are expressed more on one sex or prominent only in one sex due to the factors of sex hormones despite the genes being present in both sexes. Now those illustrations presented earlier are just some of the examples surrounding this topic. And throughout the discussion, we will be covering the genetic mechanisms behind these traits, analyze examples, and solve practice problems to deepen our understanding. By the end, we hope to answer key questions, such as why do some traits appear only in males or females? How do hormones influence gene expression? And how do sex-influenced traits differ from sex-limited traits?
Now let's talk about the sex-related inheritance. Sex-related inheritance refers to genetic traits whose expression is influenced by an individual's biological sex. These traits are determined by genes located on sex chromosomes, the X and Y, but are affected by sex hormones. Sex-related inheritance, it means or it refers to the transmission of genetic traits linked to sex chromosomes, the X and the Y. So in humans, as we all know, females have two X chromosomes, the X and the Y, while males have one X and one Y chromosome. So at this illustration, the image illustrates sex chromosome inheritance and sex determination through gamete formation and fertilization. So sa figure 3, it shows the gamete formation involving only sex chromosomes. It shows how the male, the XY, and female XX sex chromosomes segregate during the cell division. So ang female is makaproduce lang siya only og mga X bearing eggs since ang female is naman siya duha ka X chromosomes, while ang male is makaproduce siya og two types of sperm. Ang isa kay ga-carry og X chromosome while the other is iyang gina-carry kay Y chromosome. So in figure 4, it shows the sex determination. It depicts fertilization where a sperm or the X or Y fuses with an egg in which X. So if ang X-bearing nga sperm is ma-fertilize siya with the egg, the zygote is female, XX. In other situation, if ang Y-bearing sperm is ma-fertilize siya with the egg, the zygote is male since ang yahamong result is Y o X. So this process explains how the father determines the sex of the offspring, as the mother can only contribute to an X chromosome, while ang sperm is mao na siya ang mag-determine whether the child is male or female.
So what are these sex-limited traits? These sex-limited traits are traits which are exclusively expressed by one species. It is the genes that inherited by both males and females but only expressed in one due to sex hormones. So basically, both sexes have this gene and only activated with the correct hormonal environment. So what are the examples of these sex-limited traits? We have in male the beard or bungot, and for females and other mammals is the lactation. We all know that females only express lactation, okay? So now, here are some of the female genotypes and male genotypes when it comes to lactation. So, no, zero or wala joy possibility nga mag-lactate ang male. That's part of the sex-limited traits nga. Inherited siya by both sexes, but it will only express due to the help of correct hormonal environment. So now, let's proceed to a practice problem. So, number 1. So, a homozygous lactating cattle mates with a male not lactating cattle. What will be the possible sex traits of the offspring? Here, in our slides, we presented the answers of the problem number 1. And as you can observe, no, sa atong Punnett square, it's male and female. Okay? It is stated in the problem itself. So, based on the result of the Punnett square, there is 2 females and 2 males. But only the female cattle express the lactating gene. So, males do not have lactating gene. Now, let's proceed to practice problem number 2. So, the question is, what will be the possible traits and sex of the offspring if a female heterozygous lactating cattle mates with a male not lactating cattle? Do not be confused with the problem number 1 and problem number 2, because problem number 1 says that homozygous female na lactating, while here in the problem number 2 asks that female heterozygous lactating cattle. So do not be confused with that. So try to answer it on your own. Are you done? So if you got the correct answer, same here in our presentation, then very good. So as you can observe in our presentation, we have 1 XL XI, we have 1 XL YI, we have also 1 XI XI, and we have also another 1 XI YI. So basically, we have 1 female na lactating, we have also 1 female na not lactating, and 2 males na not lactating. So 25% of it is a female cattle that is lactating, and 25% is a female not lactating, and 50% is male na not lactating. And for the next topic, it will be presented with my group mates.
Good day everyone, this is Harry and today we are going to continue our discussion and we are now here in the sex influence traits. And when we say sex influence traits, it is a trait that can be expressed in both sexes but more frequently in one than in the other sex. So it means that specific trait, both men and women has this specific trait, but it is more common to see in one sex. An example of that is the baldness. The baldness trait can be seen in both men and women, but it is more frequent to see in men because of a certain reason, and that reason we're going to discuss that one as we go along with our discussion today. Now, sex influence traits are also autosomal. When we see autosomal, they are not tied to the X and Y chromosomes. So wala di sila nandito sa X and Y chromosomes. However, their expression depends on the hormones. Is what I'm talking about. This is the reason why the traits, why that specific traits, why traits that are present in both sexes is more common siya sa specific nga sex. It's because of the hormones, specific hormones. For male, an example of that, is the male pattern baldness, which is more common siya sa mga lalaki. It's because of the testosterone, in which the testosterone influence how the gene are being expressed. And even though both men and women can carry it, so while the genes are the same, the outcome varies depending on the sex. Now, for us to really understand what we're talking about, the sex influence rates, let's have this practice problem number 1. Now, Gina is a carrier of bald, while Anna, his pregnant partner, is a carrier of heterozygous non-bald. A few weeks from now, they are expecting their first child based on the gametes carried by the parents. Will there be a chance that their child is a female carrier of a bald trait? Now, in order for us to know, or for us to answer the question, let's have the Punnett square. Okay, as you can see in your screen right now, there is Punnett square, that one, and as you can see, para madali na to siya ma-identify, we put there the XX and the XY. The XX represented sa mother and the XY is for the father. Okay, and now ang kaning upat diri ani siya, ang for the gametes of the father is naka-vertical siya, and for the mother is naka-horizontal. And for the question is that naa by chance or magkaanak ba sila nga babae nga carrier siya sa bald nga trait? So, in order to answer that one, pangitao na to diri ang babae. Okay, pag ang babae is era sa chromosome nga XX. Okay, so makita nato diri sa babaw. Okay, so sa makita nato dira ang there is a possibility, no? A possibility. Yes, makita na yes, there is a 25% na magkaanak sila ang babae nga carrier sa bald na trait. Okay. Next, practice problem number 2. Troy and Gabriela are expecting to have their first child at the end of the month. Troy is a carrier of a heterozygous bald trait, while Gabriela is carrier of the heterozygous non-bald trait. Will there be a chance that their child will be a male non-bald carrier? So again, let's use a Punnett square for us to know it, kung anak ba sila o lalaki nga carrier sa non-bald trait. So as you can see here in your screen right now, na itong Punnett square, and based on that one, we can really say there will be 25% nga magkaanak sila og lalaki nga carrier sa non-bald na trait. Okay.
Now, let's proceed with the role of autosomal genes. Now, autosomal genes are found on chromosomes that are not sex chromosomes, meaning they are not those itong ginatawag na itong X or Y. So, these genes determine many traits in both males and females. However, some traits controlled by autosomal genes behave differently depending on whether the person is male or female. So this happens due to hormonal differences leading to sex-limited traits and sex-influenced traits. Now let's have the role of autosomal genes in sex-limited traits and sex-influent traits. So in sex-limited traits, these are the traits that are carried by both male and females, but they are only expressed in one sex because of hormonal control. For example, milk production in female mammals. So even though males have the genes for milk production, they do not express them because they do not produce the necessary hormone. On the other hand, sex-influent traits are the traits that appear in both sexes, but their expression differs because male and female hormones influence how dominant or recessive the gene is. So like gigamit ng example sa akong mga ka-groupmates, we have the pattern baldness. In males, the baldness gene is dominant due to the hormone called testosterone, making hair loss more common in males. On the other hand, in females, the same gene is recessive, so they are less likely to experience baldness unless they inherit two copies of the gene. To make it simple, while both males and females have the same autosomal genes, the way these genes are expressed depends on hormonal differences, which this leads to traits that either appear only in one sex or what we call the sex-limited, or appear differently in each sex or what we call the sex influence. Next, we have the hormonal influence on gene expression, which will be discussed to you by my groupmate.
Good day, everyone. Now, let me continue our discussion. And now, we're going to talk about the hormonal influence on gene expression. Hormones like testosterone and estrogen regulate gene activation, shaping male and female specific traits. For testosterone, the primary male hormone, enhances the expression of genes responsible for male characteristics, such as beard growth. And then for estrogen, the primary female hormone, activates gene related to female traits like breast development and milk production. Example of this is for male, which is the pattern of baldness. The gene for baldness is present in both men and women. However, testosterone enhances its effect, making baldness more common in men. While, for example, in female is breast development. While both sexes have mammary gland-related genes, estrogens stimulate their activation more, leading to a breast growth in females. So, hormones play a crucial role in determining physical traits by activating specific genes. Understanding their influence helps explain biological differences between sexes and their impact on gene expression.
Good day, everyone. So, allow me to continue the discussion, and we're going to discuss epigenetics and the environmental influence. So, while genetics play a major role, environmental factors such as diet, lifestyle, and stress can modify the expression of sex-limited and sex-influenced traits through epigenetic changes. How our environment can affect the way of our genes work, that is epigenetics. So while our genes provide a basic plan for our traits, things like what we eat, how we live, how much stress we experience can change how these genes are used. This is especially important when it comes to trait influenced by sex, meaning traits that appear differently in males and females. So, what is epigenetics? So, epigenetics is the study of how genes can be turned on or off, without changing the actual DNA sequence. So think of DNA like a recipe book. So epigenetics controls which recipes are used. So let us know how our environment affects the epigenetics. First, in the first example is the diet. So the food we eat provides nutrients that affect our genes. For examples like vitamins like folate and B12s help regulate gene activity. The next example is the lifestyle. How we live, like how we live. So exercise can improve gene function, while habits like smoking and drinking can cause harmful gene changes. Next is the stress. Well, of course, if you're very stressed, it could affect your body. So, long term stress can change genes related to mental health. That is it. So, making people more vulnerable to anxiety and depression. That's why if you are stressed, you're prone to have a depression because it developed. So when we say sex-limited traits, these are traits that only appear in one sex, even if both sexes have the gene. So, for example, only female can produce milk because of hormone-related gene activation. And the sex influence traits are these are the traits that can show up in both sexes but in different ways. So, for example, baldness is common in men because testosterone affects gene expression. Another thing is the environmental factors like diet, as what I have said earlier. Environmental factors like diet, stress, and exposure to chemicals can change how these traits develops. An example of epigenetics, something like that. Obesity and hormonal imbalance can affect testosterone levels in men, potentially influencing baldness and other traits. So as you can see in the picture, the male is obese. Yeah. So it does affect its testosterone level. That is just some example of epigenetics and in environmental influence. Next is nutrition during pregnancy can affect the development of sex-limited traits in offspring. That's the example for epigenetics and environmental influence.
To sum it up, sex-related inheritance, specifically through sex-limited and sex-influenced traits, are important aspects of genetics that help explain differences in trait expression between males and females. Sex-limited traits are expressed in only one sex despite both carrying the gene, while sex-influenced traits appear in both but more commonly in one sex due to hormonal influence. Now, understanding these concepts is essential in genetics as they help explain the complexity of inheritance patterns that are not strictly based on the classical Mendelian rules of inheritance. Thus, these variations contribute to the diversity of traits observed across sexes in nature. And that would be all. Thank you.